Okay, good afternoon, buen día. Thank you for joining us today. This panel is about promoting equality and accessibility through sports. I'm going to slightly change it, guys. I'm going to call it championing equality and accessibility through sports because we have some incredible, distinguished guests with us here today who are actively working in this space. And by brief introduction, my name is Christina Unkel. I am the president and general counsel at Tampa Bay Sun, new women's professional soccer team, and I also do TV work for CBS Sports as a referee analyst. So yes, I do love the referees. Please don't yell at them. That's my public service announcement. But I'm here today really to highlight with this incredible group what it is that they do and how we are bringing sports and combining sports together, because we always say it's more than a game, and this is truly what they're doing. And so love to bring that to you from all your walks of life today, how you can bring a takeaway back home and really pick their brain, and that's kind of the point. So a little bit of housekeeping matters, first 30 minutes. Have a really good conversation, incredible individuals, just got to meet them over the past 30 minutes. And then the last 20, so get ready, Q&A session, so if you have any kind of questions that you would like to do. So I know there was a brief introduction, but I still want to kind of highlight. So to my immediate left is Nicole Preston, President and CEO of D.C. Special Olympics. So with over 30 years of professional experience in both corporate and nonprofit organizations in the U.S. abroad, such as PepsiCo, Hewlett-Packard, American Disability Associations, she leads a team who really provides sports, health, and inclusion programs for children and adults with intellectual disability. So really excited to hear what she's doing in her space, and like I say, it's God's work for sure. Right next to her is Danita Johnson, President of Business Operations for DC United, slightly new to the area, so really excited to kind of hear what she's doing here for those with the Major League Soccer DC United team. Previous experience, over 15 years in the sports industry in the WNBA, NBA, and the NBA G League. So I'm going to pick her brain because she's also launched professional sports before. When you launch a professional sport, it's very, very interesting. But we'll also dig into a bit of her We Are Women campaign, where we now say everyone watches women's sports. There was an error that we like to forget, where people did not watch women's sports because it was not on TV. And she championed that cause and had sellouts at Staples Center. So look forward to speaking to that. And last but not least, Andrés Muntaner, Director of Camps and Clinics for the Fundación de Real Madrid, so the Real Madrid Foundation. Him and I were just talking about, I did not realize Real Madrid had a foundation, so I'm excited to hear the work that they do in not just the domestic, but the global game of what they do. So that being said, the framework and identification we're looking for is to identify significant barriers within our sport and accessibility and how we do that. So my first question is going to go to Nicole. And Nicole, I really want to dig into your experience that you had in both the nonprofit and the for-profit sectors, and how that's really helping you in providing inclusion with the types of athletes that you work with.
Thank you. Yeah, years working in corporate America as well as nonprofit organizations means that I understand both sides, what each organization is looking for, their needs, how they're operating, and how to best bridge those gaps. To create more accessibility, more equality for everyone. When I started in corporate America in the 80s, I was always the only woman in the room, and definitely the only minority. So really, kind of bringing everybody up to speed about inclusion and equality and equity for all people. So now with Special Olympics DC, I am, blessed every day to get to teach the world about people with intellectual disabilities and what they can do, not what they can't do. So we have all people of all abilities, and Special Olympics DC creates that equity that we talk about by providing them the opportunities to play sports from the lowest to the highest level. So the two things that Special Olympics does that are unique is one is called divisioning. So we division our athletes by their similar gender, age, and ability. So as Christina shared a story with me, she witnessed a Special Olympics athlete that blew past her in 50 meters. So some of our athletes really perform at a high level, some at a low. But when we do competitions, they're all divisioned into heats so that they're competing with like times, and that way everyone has that chance to win those medals. And so that's what's equity, right? And the second thing is unified sports, which is really a terrific program that brings people with and without intellectual disabilities together. We have adult leagues. Any of you can come out and play your sports. I dare you to challenge my athletes because they talk a lot of trash, and they will, they will compete hard. We do volleyball, basketball, golf, tennis, so anyone can join, and you were matched with an athlete of similar competitive ability to play. So what does that do? That breaks down all the barriers. You get to see those abilities, you understand that community better, we create more awareness, and everybody has a great time playing sports in a really inclusive manner. And it creates that inclusive community so that people with intellectual disabilities just can be included in play like all of us.
And I know we talked about, the opportunity, like some of your athletes went to the Commanders, right?
Yes.
And they were able to see and witness that. What would you say is probably a way that the corporate world, right, and I'm going to say the for-profit world,
yes,
can kind of help give back to the organizations? And I hate to use the word for-profit and non-profit,
right,
because either way, they're both businesses.
Correct.
It's just where the monies go. How can we help, because there might be some individuals here today, how can we help to highlight that? I know we talked about Special Olympics being not just a world game as well as nationals. It's
Yes.
how can they get their community and their brand behind the efforts that you do?
Yeah, we invite all organizations to really get involved with being more inclusive. So a great example we just had with Bank of America. Bank of America did two things with us recently. They have a commitment to hire Special Olympics athletes, which is great. They have another number of employees. They do an inclusive youth summit, so our athletes were able to come and speak with the young people that they brought from colleges all over the country to learn about various things, but one of the things was inclusiveness. So our athletes had the opportunity to speak from a youth leadership perspective to these other young people. So again, that's spreading awareness, that's that exposure that's so important. And then doing an event with us with the Commanders. So they did a clinic. My athletes got to do a clinic with the Commanders out on the field, and so, really important opportunities, just like we've been able to do with D.C. United during the All-Star games here in D.C. that D.C. United hosted. We had a unified All-Star soccer game, which again gives that exposure, gives them that opportunity to get on the big field and show what they can do.
So I am going to do a push for her. So yes, they will take donations and money, but at the same time, there's other kind of in-kinds that we can do that really enrich the culture and, like you say, break down what might be perceptions or barriers, yes, between, everyone with all different kinds of learning. So Andrés, I know you deal with a lot more of the youth, and I love it because we in football, sorry, it is soccer here in the United States, but football, Dile, we say it's the beautiful game. So with you as the director of the soccer and the clinics, how do you see it as catalyzing the game from all different communities and cultures?
Yeah, thank you as we know that although we target the most the youth, and we when the Real Madrid created a foundation in 1997, the way of thinking was how the Real Madrid could use the power of the brand and the power of soccer to help the communities. So at that point, we thought that we using soccer and basketball as a tool to improve education and improve inclusion through schools. We understand the schools as a place where our kids gather to learn and to play. So we know that the soccer is a very aspirational content, and that's the excuse to gather kids in our programs. So we created across the world. Now we are having schools in 70 countries, working with more than 40,000 kids every year, boys and girls, where we give them the sports content, training twice a week, but working with our local partners, our local NGOs and foundation, adding other content as this kind of 21st century soft skills that helps the kids and their families to better inclusion. For example, here in the States, we work with most of our programs are within communities with a high immigrant background. Most of them first and second generation immigrants, they with the lack of English speaking. So and before and after the trainings, they have English lessons. Always to try to help to them to integrate in the community. But we are not only targeting the kids, also on the weekends, we target families with a special content for them in order to help them to integrate in the community. That's why all parents are invited to participate in our workshops, knowing that parents are having a very important role within the empowerment of the kids. So that's why we always think that our programs are targeted for kids, but also for parents. We don't also teach English. We have many other skills that in order to giving them autonomy and self-empowerment. So we try to become, our kids to become leaders in their community and to spread what they have learned in the social sports schools, not about sport, but other skills in their schools and their communities. So to give them a leadership role in order to become a self-empowerment for them. So we have seen in the past, this almost 30 years, how our program has improved a lot, a reduction in school dropout, a huge increase in the number of girls participating in our programs. We have seen how they reduce the number, the violence across the families, the kids in our program. So that's how we, the power of $2 sport can increase and improve a lot in at-risk communities, and help our kids to better self-empowerment, really a lot. So in the States, we are really great example how these immigrant communities, our school has improved their lives. No?
So in the United States, where is the Real Madrid Foundation having impact right now?
Yes, now we have 13 schools with more than 600 kids in Denver, in Florida, in Miami, in Arlington, Virginia, and in Lawrence, in Massachusetts. But all these are our unprivileged communities, but the foundation sustainably finances all these programs with thanks to the support of a sponsor like Abbott or ATT or Fundación Mafre, but with our resources. We have now the biggest number of camps in the US. This summer we have in 128 locations with more than 15,000 kids. And thanks to their participation, we are able to support all these charity projects across the world. So that's like a good positive circle. All those who can afford it are supporting the better lives of all those immigrant communities we are working with in the States. So in 5 locations, in five states, 13 social sports schools, we are working yearly with almost 700 kids a year, and families, not only kids, but yet we have a really indirect positive with only their families and communities. So.
Yeah, no, I love that thing of the ecosystem of the child,
Yeah.
right? Because if you don't have that support system, then the work's only going to go so far. If there's someone here in the group who wants to work with the Real Madrid Foundation because they understand and they've identified areas of individuals, what's the best way for them to become involved with the Real Madrid Foundation?
Yes, locally we work in those in Arlington, in Lawrence, in Denver. We work with a public educational system of the public foundations that helps the foundation to identify the needs of the specific community, because we know about the sport, we know about football, but then all the other needs are always suggested and work with those local foundation locals. We have worked with families, teaching them technology, giving them food supply or nutrition, healthy habits thanks to Abbott. So the specific needs are thanks to identified by the local foundation. So any public or private authority related with education or in any problematic community, we can work with them in order to implement a social sports school using the sport as a hook or as the tool, that catalyzer that helps us to get involved private and public communities or companies to support that community. No?
So we're going to talk about another topic about sports, the gender gap, but I still want to say in this social inclusion in sports. Outside of efforts or works that you guys have done, or if there's an effort, like what are sports initiatives that you have seen, other programs that you've seen are highly effective in using sports as social inclusion? Yeah, whoever wants to take that one.
Let's see, social inclusion, Obviously, Special Olympics is one that does that because we do so much work in the communities with the Unified Sports Program and with the schools. Many people don't know we have a very big Unified Champion Schools program here in this district. We work with about 40 DC public schools. We do things at all levels, schools as well as colleges. So we have Special Olympics clubs at all of the universities here in DC, and nationwide we're in more than 8,000 schools. So that is really creating that social inclusion at the youth stage when it's important, when you can teach people that tolerance and that acceptance and that idea of inclusion when they're young. So hopefully they grow up with that and can continue that as they go on into their lives in sports and corporations and throughout that. So that program for us is creating that social inclusion.
And that program is tied in with the school systems,
Yes.
right? Okay,
We bring that to the school systems to create inclusive school climates.
Yeah, okay. I love that, the structure of it, right? Something that the kids have to go to and eliminates accessibility issues too.
Right, and it's for kids with and without. So that's the important part. The kids without disabilities learn to partner with kids with disabilities to create that inclusion.
Danita, you have one?
I would just, in our partnership, you guys anybody that's based here in DC is probably familiar with DC Scores. DC Scores is a youth soccer program that runs in Title I schools that are majority underserved schools here in the DC market. In that partnership with them, what I love about it, it's not only about them having access to soccer, it's also access to arts. So it's a combination of the two that they're receiving. So they learn about poetry, writing, all of that is a big segment of the piece with them, inclusive of sport. And as we know, in many of our schools, both sport and arts have limited accessibility for a lot of youth. So us within that partnership is something that we really strive for. And part of from a business perspective, we actually sell into our other partnership opportunities to actually help sponsor schools for DC Scores to add on new schools for the programming where they could be fully funded to program for the year. So I'm also a board member of DC Scores, and so as we talk about the expansion of it, we look at year over year between now and 2026 as we prepare for the World Cup. How do we grow? How do we get more schools underneath our scholarship program? So as a business unit at DC United, we also get to support that through our partnership efforts that we sell as well.
I love that. And thank you for that reminder. Sometimes we forget, right? The World Cup is coming. Next year, FIFA Club World Cup is coming on the same time as Gold Cup, right? But highlighting the fact that, people look at sports and just think sports. But the integration between art and culture and, right, we see these like fashion kits of the people, especially in the women's sports, coming up to games and whatnot, that inclusion and that hybridness of it. So sports initiatives that I love with your DC Scores is that it ties both of that, not just soccer, but arts as well. Then there's music and entertainment and whatnot. So if those are not interested just only in sports, there's a great cross hybrid that also includes corporate partners who then you hit more initiatives that they like as well too on that. Is there another sports initiative that you've seen, especially with your experience around the world?
As mentioned, we really believe, mostly in Spain, the foundation runs a big number of adapted schools where we work with inclusion with kids with different capabilities, physical and mentally, playing with other kids. So we really think that is very powerful for everyone to see that everyone is to teach both, that they can play and they can develop and they can work and they can enjoy together, not having a different program for everyone, because we really believe that the power of working together and playing together. So we don't have that many outside Spain because the cost is huge. And we don't have that many professionals that how to understand, to know that one of the efforts of the foundation is also to teach the teachers. We have a very comprehensive program about coaching PA teachers and specialized to coach all these programs. And visibility is important now in Spain. So I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, there was La Liga Genuine for the specialized for kids with different mental disabilities. So this is something of knowing of visibility. If no one sees that, it's very difficult to people to support that. So I think that we have the more and more involvement in these activities, initiatives. We know about sports, but you mentioned, we know that we also a lot of programs matches sports and culture, because sports and entertainment, music are the most powerful contents to bring kids to a program, and then we have them gather and then enroll it, so we can give them any other teaching, no?
No, I love that. With it, the more we can tie with that and bring that culture into it, the more that you're going to have impact as using sports as that vehicle. Now, I do want to turn over because here specifically in the United States, if you're not feeling it, you might be hiding under a rock, because I even know people who keep coming up to me and talking about sports and they hate sports, so it's kind of ironic. But the drive of women's sports in the United States is strong, and having the work I've done around the world, the United States leads in that department. We're not too far behind. We're always chasing the Spanish women's football team, but that's a different story. Trying to always beat them when they do the little rundos around us. But with the rise of women's sports on TV now, in the presence, being seen on it, and truly your two presence on it, the sports gender gap of having women in leadership positions. So, Danita, I kind of wanted to turn your attention to you, and as I briefly mentioned to others, is that the We Are Women campaign, working with the LA Sparks, driving ticket sales and revenue and people to be at a game that don't know what's going on because it's not being covered by media. Like, through your experience, what could you say about, the sports gender gap, whether that's more women in that role or, the different, things that you've learned about it that would be helpful for others when they're driving and championing women as leaders?
Yeah, I think, what you see now, hope you all are watching the playoffs. I'm going to make my way to New York in a couple of days.
Aces lost, I'm sad.
I know they did, but I hope you guys are watching the WNBA playoffs. But what you see right now is 20 plus years of work. And so I say that, and I want to give some, when we talk about women in sports, where it is today, we need to talk about where it was and how it got here, because I think the journey is really an incredible piece of this. And so when you see the WNBA now, you see what's happening, and you compare it, and I'll go to the NBA, I think they're at, 78 years? I lost count. We're right under 30 plus years for the WNBA. And what you're really seeing is an evolution of a sport, the evolution of when you have generations coming into a sport, when the athleticism continues to change and evolve, you're gonna see heightened play. Not that the legends of the W, such as the Cynthia Coopers, the Cheryl Millers, other those were not legends, but what I say is the ability to have that next generation watch them, where you get that next level of the Candace Parker to now you get the Angel Reese and the Caitlin Clarks. That is called generation in sport. And what happens with that, with the generation in sport, specifically with this younger generation, due to social platforms and things of that nature, they have the ability to tell their stories, which then creates a different type of fire and connection back to the actual game. And that's part of what you're seeing is, first, this is really centered around the women. Mm-hmm. And it's centered around these athletes, and it's centered around their stories and their experiences. And part of the connectivity people are feeling right now is because they feel connected to the player. But what's also amazing about this is the amplification of their voice through media and their own outlets. And this is where we talk about gender, pay, gaps, all of this starts to line into this, is that now what's happening is because the power of the voice of the women, the brands understand the reverberation that starts to happen for them from a financial aspect, right? So what you're seeing from a media standpoint, what you're seeing on television, this all started with the work of these women every single day. They always had it. Mm-hmm. But together, as they come generation over generation, it becomes more powerful. So now as the dollars come in, the new media rights deal that's coming across the plate for the WNBA, those now create opportunities for the voice to be heard, which then funnels additional dollars back to the athletes, creates new sponsorship opportunities. When you have access to stuff, as everybody has their phone in this room, and you can still get on the ticker that the WNBA game is happening, you can get information about them. I'm just going real specific, women's soccer too, it's all in the same. But you now have access to them, which creates opportunity to generate revenue off their platforms. And what does that do for brands? It draws interest. It gives them an opportunity to elevate their brand of players. And so I think that's really the ecosystem that has occurred from where we were even 10 years ago to where we are today. And that is what's going to continue to happen. And it's not just a moment in time. This is generations of work. And when you have generations of work, you start to see result. And if they do what I believe they can do, they can really magnify these results in the long term by making sure the foundation was strong. And so that's what I think is happening in women's sports. I think that's what you're seeing across the board. And it's very exciting to watch. And so there's a natural connection because most of us like competition in some form or another, and that's what they're delivering in every single one of these matches and games that are played.
So you mentioned the word it's not a moment in time, it's momentum because of the generational. So we're seeing that momentum on the stage, on the court, on the pitch. Now that you have made that move into, which I love, like business operations, president business, I'm like, oh, she's a money lady, like money control, ayo, the revenue generation, right? But now that you've transitioned into men's major professional soccer, where can you see the opportunities that may not have existed prior to champion for having women leaders in men's professional sports also?
I think what you're seeing is a transformation of the skills of women in business. It goes beyond just a women's landscape. Yes, we can serve one another, but we can serve across business in all functions. I think our femininity that we bring to the table should be welcome in every boardroom. Our nuances of how we understand people and act as women adds value to organizations. And so when I look at the sports landscape and me moving into a male sport again, I've worked in the NBA too, so I've done male sports along the way. But even moving into the MLS sector, it's how do I create other pathways for other women? How do we create access? How do we get to bring our own authentic voices into the room? One thing, if people know me, I see one of my friends in the back of the room somewhere that I saw here, they all know that I will stay true to me in the midst of this, right? And I don't necessarily have to lose that or transition who I am to actually work within the space. So I think on the men's side of things, for me, it is to show up authentically as the woman in which I am. I think the opportunity to add value from a financial P&L perspective, I think it gives us room to add a different perspective that can drive the business forward. And my job right now, outside of my day-to-day, is to create other pathways for others and create accessibility. And so I think about that often in my day-to-day.
And if I could just, I'm going to jump to Andrés real quick before I kind of get an answer from you on this too, is, you working around the world, right? There's some different kind of a cultural, but what's true for the Real Madrid Foundation is how do you see as a male ally different ways and opportunities that you can sponsor and support women, right? So we say not just like sponsoring them and mentoring them, but actually lifting and creating those pathways.
So for sure, so one of the objectives of the foundation is to work, use sport as a gender equality tool. And it was very difficult to explain this and to be believed if we didn't have. So after some years ago, we really pushed to have a lot of our coaches and PA teachers being women. So that makes really credibility, because visibility and representation is important. So now, for the past years, we have make an effort to have a staff of coaches, women coaches, and also when we open programs outside, it's also always boys and girls. Everyone, in every country, we push our partners in order to have always boys and girls. We know that in some countries it's quite difficult to start it, so we use basketball in some way to a transition to soccer. It is the bigger numbers, but we always push that to have that. And we saw that in the past years, that when we have started the program, now the younger ages, all boys and girls play together with absolutely, so we can really teach them and all these kind of lessons of the values attached to that. So it makes it easy for them, because for them it's natural, and it's natural when you a girl see a woman coach that is teaching them. Always before, when there was a man coaching them, it was very difficult to be believed when you pass the message if a girl didn't see ever a coaching, no? And we have also this story. We have a lot of girls that were former players, and that they can explain their experience. They can speak, okay, I was a little girl that I played, and now a coach or be a PA teacher. So all that real cases are important for girls in order to believe the message that we want to work the sport as a gender equality tool. So we have been a big effort. Now we have in Real Madrid also the girls team. There was a push. Now they're more and more popular. It was like a decision that has to be made by all major European clubs in order to give visibility to that, and that was passed to all areas of the club and the foundation. And at some point we decided we need to have women on the table, because as you mentioned, we have many meetings, and it's still very strange to have a woman or ladies when it's a soccer meeting or we're working with our partners. Now the more and more it's becoming more usual. That's something we rate and really push our partners to have always women and girls activities to be part of the Remedy Foundation. It's not something we have, we do, we encourage that. Even in our countries, when some would find it so difficult, maybe for example in the States it's easier, but in Mexico or in Latin America it's still seen soccer as a very manly team. That's why we push our partners. We have mostly a sponsor sponsors all the ladies and the girls programs are sponsored. We encourage a boy to bring his sister or his friend or her friend to the program for free in order to encourage them. So we really think that is important representation, and we know we have the power to push our partners to include or to add always the girls' activities within the same as boys. No.
Love it. And one of the things is like recognizing it is the first thing, right? Because you're missing a voice in that room. You can't walk in the shoes of somebody else if you're not them, right? Whether that's gender, whether that's, economic backgrounds, whether that's culture or history. It's incredibly important. I'm just going to say kind of a brief story for our male allies out there. And some of the most powerful, subtle movements is I was a FIFA referee for 7 years. And as the center referee, I would do men's professional football, and I would walk out, and immediately the coaches would shake the hands of the male assistant referees, thinking that they're center referee. And one of my male allies one time subtly stepped to the side really quickly and introduced me as the center referee, which the coach was like, oh shit, but that's a different story. But they're like, great, I thought you were gonna be an AR. You don't want me as an assistant referee, I can guarantee you that. But that being said, that subtle movement by that male ally of mine to recognize consciously or subconsciously, 9 out of 10 times it was subconscious, to step to the side to say, hey, she's the head referee, shake her hand first, which is traditional in that norm. To be able to take those off the field and put those in the room, right? Whether it's a board meeting, if you're a male ally and you know that someone's gonna be leading that meeting, right? And it's a woman, and you walk in and somebody else comes and kind of addresses you first, is taking that step to the side is incredibly, incredibly powerful, not just for that individual, your teammates, right? But most importantly, it's powerful for that entirety of that room and for leading and setting the tone of that conversation. So thank you for your male allyship for it, because I'm always like, it's not a piece of pie, right? Because women are now entering the boardrooms when we talk about sports. It's not a piece of pie, but we're all better together. I don't want 50% of the population. I want 100% of the human population when we're solving problems and using, thankfully in sports, high financial resources to impact communities. So from your perspective, seeing corporate and the nonprofit, but like, what are ways that you've seen, because corporate's a whole nother beast as well too, which we all know that, where you've seen women entering, like what's either an accessibility issue and or the ability to open up those paths for women to be at those positions?
Yeah, in corporate America, it's incredibly important for women to be able to be in those roles. As you said, and I like to pose it as leveraging difference. All of our differences can be leveraged for greater success of the organization. So once you get people to understand that, then you get them on board, because corporate is about shareholder value, about revenue, right? So how does leveraging the power of women's voices, women's participation, women's all the things we bring to the table help that? So you frame it in that way and demonstrate it in that way, as you did with showing them that you can fill the stadium, showing them that you can beat the profit for that quarter, showing them that you can sell the product, etc. So kind of have to show them. You can't tell them. You kind of got to show them still. But once you do, then you open that door for so many corporations to get on board. As you were talking about your story, it made me think of with tennis. I'm a lifelong tennis player, so Billie Jean's efforts generationally to fight for equity in women's sports and sponsorship at that level and pay equity. Women were always paid less than men for the same tournaments, and she worked to change that, as we saw Serena Williams and Venus Williams and get higher ratings than the men. So you have to do those steps to show that no, people do watch women's sports, women's athletes, women executives, women in all walks of life. When we show them how we can perform, if we open that, if we're given the chance to get in the door to show how we can perform, we perform, and then, as you said, we can open that door and help others as well.
So before we open it up for Q&A, just kind of want to highlight, right? Love this leveraging differences, right? Leverage is a power word, but leverage to do good, not to do bad. And then you open up that, the different opportunities of uniqueness, right? And then Danita hit on that concept of, right, it's not a moment, it's momentum. I love it. It's generational built. So it didn't come out of nowhere. It's not lightning in a bottle, right? And that's kind of what we're developing, not just on the women's side, but inclusion and mixing art and culture and just finding different deposits, which does open different corporate partners, right? And then we have Andrés, talking about the holistic element of the child when we're developing programs and clinics around the child that not just supports on the field and those lessons that we can teach through sport, but at the same time, the parents and in creating it, especially in cultures and communities that you're not familiar with, right? Or the generational families aren't familiar with. So really powerful stuff. Thank you guys for championing everything you do because it has impact in every way and capacity. And so I did want to open up the floor for anyone who had questions. To knock it off, we'll hand you one of our microphones. Oh. We're like, nothing to see there. We'll hand you guys one of the microphones. Oh, yep.
Hi, my name is Kevin Wensing. I have like two parts of the question. One is about teaching like sportsmanship and good values and so forth. How do you do that in your programs? And the second thing, you're talking about like arts and reading and language and so forth. But there's a lot of science in sports, from how fast you hit the tennis ball, the spin on it, and so forth. Do you incorporate sort of STEM stuff into your programs?
I can actually answer. We actually have a soccer and STEM program that we run. And we focus highly on that. It's a combination of a program. We've been running it for probably like 4 or 5 years now. We actually believe that's a great opportunity to create access for kids. So we do that with kids. We bring them in. We do programming with them. We do STEAM programming with them. But it's a pretty amazing program that we've been running for a few years now. But highly believe in it as an opportunity to educate and expand beyond. What we try to do is we take sport and put it with education in different format. So whether it's STEM, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's the arts, we really use sport as a gateway to education whenever we can tie the two together from a programming aspect.
100%, and ours as well teaches sportsmanship. That's one of the things we start with our program, sports etiquette. As a tennis player, plenty of people out here don't know their sports etiquette. So we teach the kids. Our two combination is education and leadership. So we have inclusive youth leadership. So we encourage them to become assistant coaches. So we train them to be assistant coaches as they age out of high school. So they learn that as well. So and like you said, the scoring and all the things, the aspects of the sport that are important in terms of education and leadership.
No, and for sure the same. That we really believe that the sports is a really powerful educational tool. In our programs, we include all these sport-related values: team sport, respect, leadership, that cannot be applied just in the field, but mostly outside when the kids grow. And we, as mentioned, we don't encourage them to be football players. We encourage them to be better human beings or better citizens. That's why what we are focusing in our programs, not about developing football talent, but developing them as citizens, teaching a lot of educational content thanks to the excuse of football, because it's very inspirational. We get them, and then we get them in a room or in a space where we can teach them all this other added value content.
I will. Just to say, Dikembe was such a friend of Special Olympics. He was one of our global ambassadors. I've got to work with him a number of times, so he's greatly missed. His heart was way bigger than his really big body in terms of everything he did for our population, and so much he gave to his home country, to this country, to all the youth he worked with. So he's greatly missed. But absolutely, women can be in that place. But I'll let you continue on that thought.
I think there's a couple of different ways for women to gain that access. One, it's going to be access to PE. When we talk about private equity and getting private equity dollars funded back through some of the programs that these female athletes through their own foundations have established and started are going to be helpful. Because when we think about some of our male counterparts, their actual income level to invest is going to come to them faster. Because of their income, they can invest quicker and get a bigger return on their investment. For our female athletes, what we want to look at is how are we doing this in partnership. You look at Allison Felix, she just launched her new female, it's female-led branding company. I think they're representing athletes as well. I haven't read the whole thing about it, but I was going through it the other day. She just launched that. You think about with Megan Rapinoe, Sue Bird, what they're doing with Together. That's the ones that everybody watches women's sports. The basis of that came from their organizations on the back end that actually developed that shirt that you see everywhere. What they're doing is they're doing it through film, storytelling, and opportunity to uplift women in different ways and uplift the platform across women's sports as a whole. So I think they are in motion. I think it's access to dollars that changes it. So when we sit at these tables and we talk about going into those rooms, how can we make sure that their programs that they're developing are getting funded? So the more that we can have, whether it's the firms, whether it's the investors, actually helping to uplift the platforms, because many of them have foundations. Many of them have these platforms. It's about getting additional dollars to do the work. And so that's what they're out here trying to do. That's part of the reason why you hear them sharing their individual stories. If you watch what they do across their platforms, they're thoughtful. And they're very thoughtful about it because they know everything they say and do matters, because they have a limited window in order to gain, one, the traction and the opportunity to share their stories and to build upon that for the next generation. So I think many of these female athletes are actively working at this day in, day out. You mentioned Billie Jean King. She's absolutely phenomenal. Yes, so they're there. It's about raising the voice for them so people understand where these things are coming from. But these women are heavily behind what's happening.
I just want to follow up real quick on that one too. It's because like Alex Morgan just announced her retirement, and the questions are, I love how you know where I'm going with this. Question was asked, are you going to be a coach? And she laughed. She's like, no, I'm going to be investing in women's sports. So to your point earlier, it's generational and generation on generation. And now that they're earning the monies to be able to do that and have not just the social presence and the power and influence, they're now getting the financial gains to be able to do that. So I anticipate from like this point moving on, I was just talking to a GM of another professional club, and we were talking about a player for over 6 figures for her salary, and we're laughing because 10 years ago she was getting paid $10,000 to play women's professional soccer.
And it's equity.
Yeah, and it's equity. And we're sitting there, and I'm
some
like,
of these teams are playing, and can they get equity? What rights can they negotiate? When we look at the CBAs and the shares coming back from the television rights, where else can they make money? We need equity. We need ownership. That drives us forward to help be able to reinvest in the spaces we believe in.
yeah, some of these younger athletes, like the Angel Reese, has ownership share in the DC
DC Power.
DC
that
Power.
Plays at Audi Field.
Sorry about that. I was like, it's not United. I got United in my brain here. But like, right, you're seeing these younger athletes with the money and looking for equity in exchange for their influence, who can hopefully here within the next decade have those impactful dollar gives back. I think there was another question. Yep.
Hi, I'm Kyle Alexander Darby. I run a government relations firm, local, state, and federal, based in Philadelphia. I currently represent the New York Red Bulls, so I've been thinking a lot about how we implement football. I want to really ban the word soccer in the U.S. That's one of my goals. How to expand football, particularly in the inner cities, where there's not a lot of investment, there's not a lot of involvement or cultural competence really with the sport. Can some of you really just talk a lot about how you go into that process, whereas there's not previous investment, there's no team, there may not be a lot of involvement or sports teams in the communities for the youth to be involved with the actual sport. How do you go about kind of starting that process and building out some of the infrastructure there?
I have an example. So I'm from Tampa Bay, so I work close hand in hand with the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. And they have a local hockey initiative where they build like small little hockey, kind of, it's go figure, I don't really play that much hockey, right? But it's hockey essentially on like on a hard pavement. And one thing that I've noticed and I'm focusing on in the football world is how do we build just facilities, because right now access to a field is almost impossible in the United States. Whether that's because like youth clubs are taking over and the public fields are being rented out, you can't go play ball. And when I was growing up, I lived right across the soccer field, and I would always be at the soccer field. And then it's cultural, but you know, my family would come and we would all just put socks and shoes and we'd play 3v3, right? And it was just us falling in love with the game again. And in this country where soccer is number 5, the 5th biggest sport, right? It's not number 1 like the rest of the world is, right? I go to England and I know more people there than I do here in the United States, is finding a facility that we can have that's open, especially in communities like that, where it's just a plot of grass where they can just pick up the ball and play. And that's the beautiful part of the game, and that's why we always look to the Brazilians, right, who just pick it up and jogo bonito, right, because they're just playing for the love of the game. So if you can start opening up access to small-sided pitches, whether it's grass pitches or it's futsal courts or stuff, like, and start encouraging that, right, where something as bringing literacy or food or after-school programming or something to that extent, and it's finding those developers, right? So the team I joined, one of the person is the major developer in the Tampa Bay area. Without having the political influence and as well as actual access to build things in, it's really hard to get to that. It's always a nice concept, but you need those people that move it. But I personally, and that's kind of one of the things that I'm building up in Tampa Bay, is how do I start building little fields throughout the Tampa Bay region in those communities that either soccer is not their number 1 sport, right? Because they typically play basketball or another type of sport, and just keep those fields as open as possible and try not to take the incentive of the money to rent out the facility so that kids can just play again. Like, kids don't play anymore on their own. They have to have it facilitated. They have to have a coach there. They just need to play. So for me, it goes down as stripping it to the basic essentials of football.
Yeah, so that was something really we struggle. For us, one of the important things to open up this social sports school is actually to find a place where the kids can play after school, because it's very difficult for them if you don't pay a lot of dollars or euros every month to have access to those facilities. We cannot encourage kids to play sport if they don't have the place to play. So one of the most complicated things to find here in the States or in other countries like Japan or wherever, or big metropolis, is actually the football facilities or basketball facilities for the kids to play. That's for us to act in an accessible way. Even for our huge camps program, our partners struggle to find accessible and not really amazing expensive facilities for the kids to play. So I think one of the most important things is the FIFA projects, a program to actually build football pitches, are really important in order for the kids to play and to have a safe space after school where to gather and to enjoy the game, no?
I would just add to that, I think this is the beauty of when business, city, and community come together. So when we did the All-Star Game in 2023, and this was pre-All-Star Game, we had already been working on this. We had made a commitment about building mini pitches across the city. And so, but it was a beautiful combination of us as an organization partnering with the U.S. Soccer Foundation and working with our local schools and city to actually bring it to life. So I think in order to actually activate what you're talking about, it becomes a true partnership across multiple verticals. And then you can have the opportunity to do like the mini pitches in different locations throughout your city to create access to play. The great part about this, I think, when you go about it, when you do the mini pitch builds, you want to build them in some of the schools actually, like on the school campuses is going to be a combination of what I would recommend there. In addition to that, when you do the mini pitches, what you want to try to do is continuing education programs for the actual families. These are things that we do at DC United as well. Because what I see often, just being as a black woman in sports, specifically I grew up around basketball and football. I worked in basketball forever, obviously. The pathway to pro is something not known by many African American communities. And when they look at football, when they look at basketball, they know immediately how to get their kid to the next level. What happens is the lack of knowledge around the actual system of how soccer actually elevates their youth to have that next pathway to help get their families out of poverty, move into new locations, they don't necessarily know. So understanding the academy system, understanding what that is, the beauty in the academy system, these kids get scholarships, they get education, they're playing at a high level, the opportunity either play in the States or overseas. But I think a lot is going to happen in those school systems to actually educate on the pathway to pro, but that can happen on those mini pitches with those parents. And I think that's part of the education that has to happen, I think, for soccer, football in the US. That's missing because a lot of our communities don't know that. Now, for our brothers and sisters that come from communities in which have had that background, born and bred, that's what they came out knowing, we lack some of that education internally, which also hinders us about the power of the sport.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I actually led a group for urban sports within Special Olympics, recognizing we even had an issue. So it was DC, Philly, Newark, LA, Chicago, the urban centers around the country. Because the number one problems are that I face and we all face: facilities and transportation. So those are the two big ones. And transportation is very expensive. To be able to get our families engaged in these urban centers to participate and to build.
Good. That was a great segue. My name is Joe Scroy. I work for Senator Cory Booker. I actually do transportation and infrastructure projects, trying to build out capacity for some of the macro events we've been talking about, and not just building out capacity, but doing right by the respective communities. And my question is, mindful that we're in an embassy right now, where do you all see the role of government from the local level generally up to the federal level? How do you see us being able to affect this theme of sports diplomacy? Thank you.
Yeah, as she said, it's you have to bring the three together: the government, the community, the business community, the sports community, to really work together to make some real changes. And what happens is the lowest income communities are less able to advocate for themselves, so they don't get the voice. So, a lot of us in the community are trying to elevate their voices to say, why is the transportation not in these communities? It's over here, which is why it's such a struggle for these families to participate. So that's the hard part. Someone's got to be the voice for those underserved communities in the halls of power and business, to get the facilities and the transportation there as well. Because, it all comes down to dollars, but at some point, there's the piece of equity of including your communities.
I would kind of narrow on that too, is advocacy, going back to that voice side of it. I've done civil business litigation for over almost 15 years now, but like our club is sharing right now a temporary stadium with a local high school that was a high school that was historically overlooked, was taken away from back in the segregation eras. And I remember being in that school board meeting, which was the longest school board meeting historically on time. I was like, great. And everyone's like, leave, leave, leave. You're going to get the stadium. You're going to have a partnership. But that started with me first going to the school and talking to the principal to say, is this something that you would want to do? So although it's not a true public-private partnership, a P3, when it comes to dollars, it's a partnership in the sense that I work with Hillsborough County School District. I work with that school, and we've invested over $8 million in bringing that stadium up to a higher level for women's professional Division I. But at the same time, when we leave in 3 to 5 years and we build the permanent stadium, we are leaving a legacy and an impact that school is currently using, but will always continue to use, instead of me building a temporary stadium in the middle of nowhere. So I think advocacy is that biggest piece, because I was asked in that school board meeting, why would anyone invest $8 million in a historically Black and Hispanic school? And my response was, why not? So if I didn't have that piece of advocacy and litigation and training for it, I don't think we would have got it. So kind of in your shoes is finding and identifying those opportunities yourself as well, and reaching out to some of these sports organizations where they might not have an individual who understands how to advocate on behalf and create these kind of unique partnerships, that there is a need for that. And there is a lot of benefit and opportunities like mini pitches at schools. That's another thing I'm gonna go look into, so thank you. I think there was, one more question. Yeah. I think we got about 2 minutes.
yes, and you know, in the short term, yeah, we talk about it and try to provide the gap. You know, increasingly these days talking about the gaps I'm filling between what government doesn't do, particularly for youth with disabilities, but in general. You know, so yes, we're filling the gap as well as talking to the school boards and the chancellor of schools and the mayor's Department of Education and, you know, all the powers that be about these things to make some changes. But, you know, trying to serve in the meantime until larger things are addressed.
I would just add, and a lot of times it's very easy to forget about the root cause. And I think a lot of times with organizations, sport teams are guilty of it too, where they just want to solve the bigger problem that looks good on the front of the paper, right? And one of the things I've challenged my team with, and Chanel Mosley, who's the head of our foundation and community program, she understands this, and it's the reason why she works for our club, is because we want to think about things down to the basics. What are the simplistic things that are going to help impact people and make change, versus all the bells and the whistles that may feel good in the moment, but it's actually not structurally helping them in the long term. So when we do our programming, which is why it's like, if it's a mini pitch, it's at the school location because we can get there. And we know the kids most of them are making their way to school. So we find them and meet them where they are to limit those barriers of entry as much as possible. With our academies, we provide transportation to all of our kids to get to and from the practices. So we do look at it from that lens. And that goes beyond our sports programs to what we do with House of Roof here locally. We're very much focused on impact, and sometimes impact is at the simplest level of just making sure people have their basic needs. And so it is something that we have to focus on, and I think I challenge you all as you're working with organizations to continue to remind them of that, because it can get very check writing, which we all like the money, but how's the actual impact? Where's the root that's happening? So as we talk about diplomacy and sport and all of this, part of it is that. It's the simple nature. Do they even have the socks to play? And so those are things that we want to think about, and those are the types of programs we like to curate that really help take care of some of those basic needs while uplifting major projects as well.
Well, thank you, everyone. Our time is up. I know. Find us. I know we're going to be around. So thank you to Nicole, Danita, and Andrés for everything. Appreciate it. I will hand this off. Okay.